Welcome to Oceanside Chat, Light Beyond Generations. I'm Helen Wang, the host and the creator of the program. Season 3 features entrepreneurs and thought leaders who drive research and development of the future. In the past 5 episodes, our speakers span from university to industry, from workspace to outer space, from venture capitalists to entrepreneurs, and from data science to space technology. Season 3 has been a fascinating journey for myself, my students, and our global audience through the Oceanside platform. Besides the motivating spirit to produce premium content, the most challenging task was to keep the secret about the finale guest, who I met at Google's leadership retreat in 2014. Our friendship began at the retreat dinner table in Calistoga and continued to grow through the project collaboration at Google X, and my business trip to Boston in 2017, which eventually led to today's interview. Because we came from different domain expertise areas, I always enjoy our conversation and appreciate the opportunity to satisfy my curiosity about robotics. So now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Marc Raibert, the Executive Director of AI Institute, the founder and chairman of the board at Boston Dynamics, and a truly iconic figure in robotics. Marc, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Helen. Thanks for having me.
The popularity of your ideas and creations is evidenced by the YouTube videos produced by Boston Dynamics, with millions of views per video. And the most popular one, Can You Give Me a Hand, has more than 152 million views. So Marc, in your opinion, what attracts people to your robots?
You know, that particular video shows us we're really like proud parents because we're interfering with the robot doing what it's doing, but it prevails by working around the disturbance, really showing off its skills a little bit better than if it were just doing the task, you know, easily and quickly. I think people are excited by the idea that robots could become like animals or eventually even like people in how they move and, you know, someday in how they think.
Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about this someday. Hopefully that's in the near future. So in addition to your celebrity robots, you are also famous for wearing Hawaiian shirt, as we see on the screen. When did you start wearing them? How many do you have in your closet? And could you tell us the story behind them?
I don't know exactly when I started wearing them, but let's call it 15 years ago, something like that. Someone told me that she thought that they were out of fashion and I really shouldn't be wearing them. I just had one or two at the time and I was wearing one. And so I stopped wearing them for about a week. And then I thought, well, I'm not going to let her tell me what to wear. So every working day since, I've worn one. It's classified information, how many I have. It's an embarrassing number.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay. That speaks a lot. You know, the story itself speaks a lot about the character of yourself. And I also love the background on the screen. Could you tell us more about it? Where are you right now?
Yeah, right now I'm in the office of the AI Institute, which just opened up a couple of months ago. We're in downtown Cambridge. MIT is right over there. Draper Lab is there. Google has 2 buildings right here. And there's a bunch of biotech here. The Broad Institute, the Whitehead Institute are like a block or 2 away. So it's really the hotbed of R&D. And so it's the perfect place for my new operation.
Wow. So you're in the center of an innovation hub.
Yeah, exactly. Kendall Square.
Wow, that's impressive. I hope to be able to, visit you in the near future.
I look forward to it.
Who were the most influential people in your life and why?
Well, you know, I probably have to start with my parents because my father, who was a frustrated engineer, he was an accountant, but he told his mother, who was from the old country, from Russia, that he wanted to be an aeronautical engineer. And she thought that that meant he was going to be a grease monkey. And she didn't approve of that. So he became an accountant. But our basement was always filled with tools and equipment, electronics, and he was always building something. So I would hang around, mostly just watching him. And then when he wasn't there, I would be, cooking up my own contraption. So he was a big influence. The next professional influence was Ivan Sutherland, who I met when just after graduate school. And I talked to him about some robotic ideas I had, and he picked one of them to give me a little bit of funding for, and it helped me get started.
Yeah. So you founded Boston Dynamics 30 years ago in 1992, when you were a professor at MIT. So congratulations and a happy 30 years birthday to Boston Dynamics. Your story has inspired the entire robotic industry and beyond. For example, I don't have an engineering background, but I fell in love with the idea of a friendly robot who can open the door for me when needed and even dance with me. So what inspired you to found the company to begin with?
So, I had been a professor for about 15 years, first at Carnegie Mellon, then at MIT, 9 years at MIT. And, I loved that time, but I started thinking about what it would be like to make some of the work we were doing into products. And I was actually inspired when we took our MIT robots out to Hollywood to make the movie Rising Sun. This is a Wesley Snipes, Sean Connery movie. And we were just doing one scene where a scientist who was sort of portraying me, I mean, they didn't think of it that way, but that's how I think of it. And we had our robots running around, and it was so hard to take the robots out of the lab and get them to work. This was the first time we'd ever tried to take these robots that work great in the lab and take them out into the real world. And, that got us thinking about what it would take to take things to the next level. We didn't go directly to robotics at the next level. It took us a few years to get there, but that's what one of the things that inspired the start of the company.
That's such an interesting story. I also think in the origin story that how you started, it has a lot to say about, the fun part of the company, right? The entertainment, like dancing part of your robot.
It took us a while to let the fun-loving part really show through. We only started doing dancing 3 years ago. So I was the chairman, but not CEO anymore. And I kind of had an opportunity to do something a little different. To be honest, in most of my career, I concentrated on the functionality of robots. And I still believe the most important thing about a robot are the functionalities. What is that? Mobility, the ability to move around. Dexterity, the ability to use your hands or other devices to move objects around. Perception, the ability to look around in the world and understand what's being perceived. And things like that. Those are the core. And dancing, where you're just showing off or communicating by moving around in a interesting way, that doesn't really fit with the practical uses of robots. But it sure is a lot of fun. And it's a different side of the machines. And it took, a different kind of work in order to get the robots to be interesting to watch.
So we probably, as a human, take for granted, right? We move every part of our body, seems so easy. And I think dancing the part of the robot, does that show off the capabilities that sort of, well understood by the robotics, but maybe not an average, people out there, but it's fun for them to watch as well.
Yeah, it not only shows it off, it really tests it. So when we made the robots do some of the dance moves, it was really torture for the hardware. And we had to make some changes to the hardware in order to accommodate a wider range of behavior. Dancers are athletes, and athletes are athletes. And making the robots into athletes is a challenge that, expands the horizon. Also, all the controls to make them do some of the maneuvers that are in dancing, increase the boundary of capability. Those are sort of the side products. But I have to say, those aren't the real reasons we did it, even though we got the benefit of that. The real reason was to have fun and to look at the robots in a fun way.
I'm curious about the rhythm, right? Because when you move, there are certain, I mean, do you come up with the music first, the rhythm first, then you program the robot to it? Or actually robot just dance according to the rhythm? Like, what's the chicken and egg question here?
Well, Helen, you're asking a great question. And I think there's two answers. From the very first legged robot that my group has been involved with, going back to really JPL and then Caltech and then Carnegie Mellon University, we were interested in the fact that animals and people have springs in their legs. And when they do things like walking and running, they're really bouncing on those springs. So there's a rhythm or a harmonic motion in normal locomotion for people. And that's carried through how our robots work, which is a little different than how the robots before us work. But to do the dancing, we usually started with the music and then took advantage of the fact that the robots could do a bouncy motion. You know, the dance to Do You Love Me, which was the biggest production we've done so far. When I was 12 years old is when that music came out. And when I was 13, I actually had a dance partner and we were dancing to that song. And we were doing the mashed potatoes. I don't know if you know if you listen to the song, they say, do the twist, do the mashed potatoes. And they go through a whole little medley of dancing. And, I lived that as in the 60s when I was a kid. And so it was fun to go back and repeat with that same music and, make the robots do it. And it wasn't easy. To understand technically what a mashed potatoes is as a dance took a group of us a lot of work before we had a thing that we thought was a passable implementation of it.
Well, this is fascinating. Thanks for sharing the behind the scenes story. It's just so fun to know about it. If you have a time machine to go back 30 years ago, would you do it again?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been great. I love being an engineer. I can give you my engineering pitch, but engineers are the luckiest people. They get to not only use science, but also be creative. Scientists only officially get to describe what's already out there, but engineers get to make new things using science. So one thing is you get to be creative. Another thing is you get the actual satisfaction from building things with your own hands, at least if that's what you're doing, or writing software, whatever it is that you're making. And so you sort of get paid for your work those two times. And then the third time is they actually give you money to do your work. So what could be better than that?
So this is a perfect pitch for engineering. Thanks for that. So last 30 years have been some of the most rapid technological advancement in human history. Just to name a few inventions, the world's first web browser in 1993, a Google search in 1997, Facebook in 2004, iPhone in 2007, and Bitcoin in 2009, and self-driving cars in 2012. There's a long list of invention happened. 30 years is also a long time for a venture. According to Statista report, in 2020, the average lifespan of a company on S&P's 500 index was just over 21 years. So Marc, from a founder's point of view, what are the significant milestones and pivots of Boston Dynamics in the last 30 years?
So first of all, people ask me about the company. And the first thing I like to point out is I don't think we're like any other company. In fact, it's also true that probably no two companies are like each other when you get down and look at, the details. But I think the fact that I'm not really an entrepreneur at heart has to do with our 30 years, because we we kind of wandered, not knowing what we were doing for many of those early years, trying a little of this and trying a little of that. One milestone was when we had a project where we were building a surgical simulator, which was something that you could feel the organs, even though they were simulated organs, and you could see them and you could do tasks in order to teach someone how to do some simple surgical operations. We scored the people. And we realized, and we took this simulator that people really loved to a couple of medical trade shows. And we realized that we didn't have the skills or the resources or the marketing talent to make a go of it. And we killed the project. Even though we loved the technology, we killed the project. And we never looked back. It was just such a great decision that was not going to succeed for us. And it wasn't too long after that that we started doing the kind of robotics that has defined the company. First, working with Sony. We secretly worked with Sony for several years. And then we started doing our own, BigDog, which was sort of BigDog was definitely a milestone because we went full force back into building hardware and combining it with software to make it do new things. I think the next milestone was when BigDog got good enough that all of a sudden we could see that you could actually have a robot in the world doing things. Before that, we were just researchers who were kicking the can down the road, saying, what's an improvement we can do over what we had before? What can we do that our colleagues or friends will admire in our work? But the idea that we were building a thing that could eventually be useful wasn't really part of our thinking. We were just trying to, move ahead a little bit. But then there was a point where I call it light at the end of the tunnel, where there were enough pieces working in place where you could see all we have to do is this, this, and this. And this thing could be, would pull together and there would be at least some tasks that you could actually use it for. I guess the next big one was when we sold the company to Google, and then from Google to SoftBank, we started to become more commercial. Up till then, we were really an R&D company, but both through the influence of Google and their interests and SoftBank and their interests, we started turning, we made the Spot robot, which there's about 1,000 of them around the world, and it's a platform that can be used as a product. And we started making a Stretch robot, which is for handling cases in warehouses, and that's ongoing work, and we have some other things in the works. So I think that was a significant turning point for the company and for me personally. I think that I discovered over the last few years that I really didn't want to be doing commercial work. I wanted to be the long-term researcher. And so it led to me starting the AI Institute, which is, what I'm working on now.
Mm-hmm. When was the BigDog established?
It started we wrote a proposal in 2003 to DARPA. In all of my academic years, I was funded by DARPA. Ivan helped, that guy I mentioned before, helped me get started with DARPA, and they funded me for many years. Then we stopped when the company started, and then the company started doing work with DARPA again. So starting with actually a project, the surgical simulator, and then BigDog, and then a whole sequence of projects after that. So we wrote a proposal in 2003, and we started work in 2004.
Mm. So what you just described is sort of a life cycle from a science research project to, practical application, and then eventually moving forward with commercialization. What a journey.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it took us from 2003, you could call it, well, sort of some very basic research before that when I was a professor. Then from 2003, you could call it 10 years until we had something that looked like it could be made into a product. And then we, productized, over the last few years. And we're continuing to, improve the reliability, build out applications for the robots, develop marketing team, sales and marketing teams, support, network, all that kind of stuff.
So you are an entrepreneur by evidence.
You know, me plus a big team of other people is I think the proper way to look at it.
Yeah. So what is the company DNA and culture that has lasted the company through difficult times and will keep the company resilient in the future?
Well, I have a set of things that I think are, I like to call the culture. I'm not sure that this was in our culture all that time, but it's the way I describe it now, both for Boston Dynamics and for the new thing. One thing I call is technical fearlessness. And what that means to me is being willing to take on a technical problem that you don't know how to solve, but one that you think is important and that you're willing to, you know, commit resources to, not only money, but your time and your talent and the talents of the people that you have available. I think that's an important thing. Another one I call diligence. Diligence means don't just try and do a tiny solution to the problem, but look at the problem from lots of directions and try and build a robust solution. You know, you at the very outset talked about the robot that was opening the door and we were disturbing it, but it kept working on opening the door. And it's very easy to program a robot to move its hand, grab the handle, pull the handle. But if you want to be able to deal with all the doors in a building, we had 98 different doors in that building that we were doing that testing in. And if you wanted to be able to do that, even if someone's pushing its hand away from the door handle and pulling on its, we had a rope attached to the robot. You know, to do all that requires a much fuller solution to the problem. And those kinds of full solutions are the ones that can really work in the world for robotics. So that's 2, diligence. 3 is intrepid. Intrepid means that things aren't always going to go right, but you got to keep pushing ahead. And I think that's really important. The truth is we love when the robot doesn't work right and it spazzes out or it breaks or it, you know, goes running, tipping down the hill and we have to go chasing after it. But being able to have that phase of the work and keep working on it is really important, I think, to have in a culture, and not to be afraid of things breaking and you having to fix them and things like that. And the 4th ingredient is having fun, having technical fun. And, you know, again, I already mentioned being an engineer, but I think part of the fun of being an engineer is that you get to work on things that are, you know, just technically enjoyable. And if you can have that, you know, you have a great life.